Earlier, I talked about people who say yes when it comes up to doing training. Jeff Flowers always says yes, and Jeff always gets excellent marks on post surveys, as far as the speaker, as far as his content, and I expect that to happen again. So without further ado, Jeff Flowers.
Yeah. I did not bring money with me, so don't ask. Good morning, everybody. Okay, I'm here to talk about the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or the STIP. A couple things, as this has been the focus. We, the STIP folks, and if you don't know who your STIP coordinators are, go to that table. They're all together. And I'll make sure I point them out here at the end too. As far as the cycle goes, or the racetrack, that's the only piece of the track that we don't touch. What do we have? What is the STIP? It's a 4-year document. It's our capital improvement program. So if you have federal funds, you're in the STIP. If you had a project that started federal, most cases it will stay in the STIP even if we've converted it to state funds. So if you think about SFLP, any other type of circumstances like that, most of the time we do that because it was picked for a reason, and it was picked through a process that we choose to leave it in the STIP because folks are always going to be looking at it. We do a STIP every 3 years, so this time period is real fun for us right now because we were actually getting ready for the draft STIP to be published. Your STIP coordinators have taken all your scoping work and everything else that have been done over the last 1.5 to 2 years, and are putting those project information into the system, so that way by the end of November, first part of December, we should have a document that's going to be ready to go to the commission for their approval in January. Moving on, how does it work? Document, it has all your phases in it: planning, preliminary engineering, right-of-way, utilities, construction, and other. So, big kicker, if anybody that's dealt with me, I have a full dollar and a partial dollar. The STIP is required to have the full dollar in it. There is a there. You can partially fund a phase in the big picture of things as long as you are very clear with that. We are funding up to DAP. We are funding through advanced plans. As long as we're very clear with our description, we are okay to do that as long as we're making it very well known of what our intent is. If we're not, then we are not in compliance with federal law. During the 15-18 STIP, the agency got about 11 different findings from Federal Highway regarding our non-compliance. This last year we were down to 3, or this last STIP. So hopefully we're down to another one. A lot of it deals with the coordination work that we have with the MPOs, which Mandy touched on, and I'm going to get a little bit into that as well. Why is it important? The document is a commitment to the public, the legislature, and our commission about what we intend to deliver. It meets our federal funding obligation requirements, which I will get into, and we qualify for federal redistribution. If you've not heard of federal redistribution, what it is every year agency gets X amount of money. We obligate that. I get to tell Federal Highway that we can take on X amount more. And I will kind of give you the numbers over the last 5 years. 27, 33, 39, 52, and another 30 number, I blanked. So we've gotten a lot of extra money over the last 5 years, and that's all because our projects have been able to move forward and get that federal obligation completed. So, kind of draw a line here. We get about 500 a year. This is our requirement, is to meet the 500 so that we can get the bonus on the far right. This is what happens if we miss. We're covering that, and we've got to find ways to do that. Folks ask the question all the time. House bill projects come in. Everybody knows that we have a new state gas tax added on so that we can have House bill funding. The reason that we are building those at federal standards is in the event that we have projects, because as Eric pointed out, life happens. You guys run into things. Certain circumstance happen, a project won't be delivered for who knows what. House bill project comes in, we are allowed to be able to fill that gap and do a swap out so that we can still meet our federal obligation. That has been the direction that we've been provided. so that way we keep as much flexibility as we possibly can to allow ourselves as much money to be able to flow into the state as we can. STIP requirements. All projects with federal funds, projects in the MPO must be included, which is fun. Folks, how many Region 1 folks we have? You guys have the most fun. Project requirements, projects names and project descriptions. So as time has gone on over the last couple years, I've been providing information to the STIP coordinators. There has been an uptick in accountability on our point to have STIP names and STIP descriptions be less techy and more public friendly. They have all that information, so if you need help on that, please see your STIP coordinator. They will help get that information to you. The idea is to be descriptive but vague in your description. I don't want, and you'll hear me say this a lot, I don't want you putting in the exact treatment you're doing for a project. You have a safety spot, intersection improvement. You don't know whether you're putting a roundabout in, a turn lane, a signal. Say safety improvement at the intersection to reduce fatals, injury, accidents, whatever. Don't put the treatment in because you just told the public that you're putting in a left turn. But when design gets going, maybe the roundabout is the right answer. So again, descriptive but vague. Give yourself the flexibility without having to go back and amend everything, because we're going to talk about STIP amendments and that wonderful process here too. Project locations. We need the project information and we need it to be put into the STIP, and our projects have to live within that A to B location. You'd be surprised how many times I find out that we're doing project from A to B and C Street somehow got included. Federal audit, we're paying back that entire project, which goes back to the federal obligation. If I have to take the federal money back, if I was at 500, I just went to 495. So the give and the take there. So make sure that we're looking at all that fun stuff. Projects show all intended phases, which again, must be fully funded. Back to the dollar picture. Designed to federal standards unless otherwise approved. So that, I was touching on that with the House bill. We do have a lot of projects that we have come up that, based on a variety of reasons, need to stay state funded. Request that. We have that. We've had that through JTA. We've had that through the OTIA process for those that have been around a while. There's certain times that the environmental circumstances at your project location may not be ideal for us to continue on a federal path. That's completely okay. We need to know that so that way we can have a good discussion to figure out what the right business decision is when we're dealing with the House bill funded projects on whether we federalize or not. There have been a handful of projects across all of those programs that we have chosen to say, we're not touching it from a federal perspective, we're doing it state funded only so that way we can reduce our liability and risk on the project because of the federal standards and needs. Types of money, so switching gears a little bit. STIP includes money from Federal Transit Agency, Western Federal Lands, and Federal Highway. There's 12 overarching programs and styles of funding that FHWA provides. My office and my folks do a really good job at this. There are 207 when I made this presentation, which was at the end of August, early September. At that time, I counted up, we have 207 different fund codes that we operate with to be able to fund projects. So that's looking at location, project type, intent, the whole nine on what your projects do, about us being able to figure out the right color of money to go to that. Over the years of me, because I was in Region 1 for 6 years before being down here for the last 5, we've done a really good job of shifting gears in project delivery, of getting away from the color of money driving the projects to allowing the project to drive the type of money going to fund. We want to pick projects that are based on what we need to fix. Go do that. Let the other people know what kind of money we're going to do. But that also entails a lot of other questions and things that we're going to throw at you so that way we just have better information to know what we're going to use. State funds. Biggest request I ever get every single time, state funds. So I'll tell you this, we've done the analysis. Once you start getting over the $4 million mark, the cost of doing business at the state funds versus federal is minimal. So if you think that it's easier at that level, it's not. The cost of doing business, once you start getting that high and the volume of cost, goes away. The other part of it, state funds are diminishing because of the fact that we just don't have the revenue coming in that we normally have had. The cost of doing business is up, and our revenue is staying flat. So the ability for us to swap out state funds is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And those in the room that have asked me a year ago, would have asked one question, and I would have said, yes, I'm not able to give you that answer today because our state cash are in a situation that we need to ensure that we're moving forward as a whole. Limited, we are still planning to do the state-funded local program. So I just sent an email to the STIP coordinators. So all the folks in the room that are getting ready for the 21-24, patience on the SFLP program, please. I will start the review process as soon as the commission approves the draft STIP. We will then do another review when the final STIP comes around because the MPO selected projects will then be incorporated. We're not doing any program changes as far as that goes. So if you've got an arts enhance local bridge project that outside of the 3 TMAs, which is Portland, Salem, and Eugene, if you've got a $5 million project on the local system, it cannot be on the state system, it has to be on the local. If we want to try to transfer ownership of the project and the risk, it'll be on the list and we will have that conversation. Fund exchange is a different program. Everybody kind of gets these two kind of entangled. Fund exchange is a program that we run through the AOC LOC through our agreement with them, but it provides cities and counties and our small MPOs the opportunity to use some of their federal funds and exchange it at 94 cents on the dollar. Most of them will go and do pavement work, use it for match on their federal aid projects, a variety of different items that they'll do, but that is a different process. It's different than the SFLP. So if you need clarification on that, and the new SFLP one-pager is going to be, or two-pager program overview is going to be coming out here soon because we're working on getting it updated. Logistics and support versus fatal flaws. This is where we're going to get a little bit more into the process. So STIP amendments, like it was just shared, we have the Oregon Transportation Commission and the Metropolitan Planning Organizations that get in the way of this process. I say that because that's what I hear. It gets in the way. But unfortunately, we have those triggers that are caused because of the Commission's desire to see certain things as well as the federal requirements regarded from the MPOs. Advice number one, better early than late. As soon as you know you have something, please start the process, because if you don't, you can potentially end up, if you'd like to move, for those that are not in the Portland area, you can move to Portland and add 6 months to your process. Or you can stay where you're at and have 2 months added on. So it's a give and a take, but that's the process that handles with the MPOs. With the Commission, it's a minimum of a 3-month delay, because the letter's going to take you about a month to write, then it has to be submitted a month before the Commission, and the Commission's going to act, and then we have the STIP amendment behind it. There's a 3-month delay roughly about that time period. Advice number 2, see advice number 1. Always go earlier. It will help you. Timeline to complete an amendment, anywhere between 1 to 6 months. Triggers. OTC, add in a new project or construction phase, cost changes, up or down. Everyone always questions the down part. It's up or down. 500,000 or 25%, whichever is less. Most of the time it's going to be a $500,000 trigger. And then construction authorization increases of $500,000 or more. Clarity on that one. You can have an authorization increase of $250,000. 6 months later, do another increase of $250,000. You're going to the Commission. Here's the cool part. You've just reset your baseline. You get another $500 after that. So that's the way the construction authorization works. So, but it is a Commission action. FHWA and FTA, we have matrices, so see your STIP coordinator. You're going to hear me say that quite a bit. That table is going to be very friendly for you. Full amendments, change in scope greater than 1/4 mile, either direction. Cost change ranges, so they've got a little bit more range compared to the Commission. If it's under $1 million, is it $1 million? There's one for 50%, one for 20, 30, 50%. Thank you. Okay, thank you. They've got the range there. Adding or deleting any construction phase. Administrative modifications, you slip a project, you combine them, you add or delete a phase except for construction. Those will be administrative and shorten the time period because we don't need federal highways approval. Data points. Number of projects in the STIP, 1,764. Number of amendments, 2018, we had 1,506 STIP amendments. 2019, we had 1,307 on 1,700 projects. That is a lot. Improvement process to reduce the numbers. Something that I know David and Tamara are going to be working on, and they're starting the process, which is better scoping and estimates. So that way we have that. New programming methods. So if you've heard of advanced investigations that Bridge and IM are going to be doing, they're intentionally taking money off the top of their funds so that they can provide better scoping estimates to be able to allow a project hopefully to process all the way through without having to go to the commission. So projects of higher risk. They're going to ask for some due diligence to be done on those so that way they can hopefully avoid having major issues along the way. CMRs with clear documentation, complete information, and accountability of the changes. And then phase gate amendments. I know, and I'll hope to get this right, David will correct me. Amendments are going to start at some point here in the near future, DAP and advanced plans basically. Those are the two time periods. That provides us with the best timing to be able to get these things through without causing major delays. Was it advanced or final? Advanced, right? For phase gating?
We got two phase gates. One at DAP, well, actually three phase gates. One at initiation, that's the region phase gate, one at DAP, and one at TFN.
Okay, starting a project. A few items, and I need my notes for this, so give me 2 seconds. Okay, are you 100% funded? That would be the first piece of the puzzle. IGAs, for those of you that have IGAs, those need to be executed prior to starting. A few people in the room will ask and go, well, wait a second, Jeff, you have approved these without execution before. You're right, I have. But I have to approve that to tell my staff that we can move that forward. The reason is that I gauge each one based on risk. We have partners that we deal with that are high risk. We have other partners that we deal with that are low risk. I have a county that upon signature at the county office for an IGA, they've already called my office going, can we please send you the money? We didn't even know it was signed yet. That county is going to be one I give a lot of grace to because they are very easy to deal with. I have other counties that are not so much. I should say one big city. You can figure out who that big city is. Then the funding request forms are ready. Your STIP coordinator helps with that piece of the puzzle. I know each region kind of does things a little differently. Timelines, and I'll get into what starts the timeline. The time that the funding request ends up at the Program and Funding Office, it's 2 weeks to get it over to Federal Highway. Excuse me, take that back. That's the Federal Highway piece. 5 business days is the expectation at my office to be able to get that into FEMAS and get you guys an EA, or starting the process towards an EA. 2 weeks for Federal Highway approval, another 5 days for my office to finalize and get an EA to you. What constitutes the start of the time period? IGA is completed, environmental docs are submitted, everything is submitted. I've had a few different discussions with people going, well, I sent you the programming request form 2 months ago. Yeah? Your IGA was signed yesterday. Well, but I'm waiting 2 months. No, my clock starts now. Because we have to have everything in place for us to be able to start the process. It just doesn't go anywhere because of the process that we have to follow with Federal Highway. All right, STIP budget. We talked about 100%, so there's themes here. If you're over budget, so if you've never heard of who has never heard of the term B code? If you haven't, put your hand up. It's okay, because this is a term that we use, and that's fair. B code is a term we use for when a project goes over budget. So if you've got a $500,000 PE phase, as soon as you go to $501, then you are over budget, which we use a B code. Well, you have 90 days to address this, or else that project's either getting shut down or you're going into non-participating. When I say non-participating, it's not about whether the work's participating, it's about whether FHWA is going to reimburse us. So 90 days means it has to go to your STIP coordinator for any potential amendment, to my office to Federal Highway to complete, to my office sending you back a note. That's the 90 days. So 45 would probably be a good starting point to make sure you guys have this done. I have issued a memo to the STIP coordinators and have shared this with them. We monitor the B codes at all times, and so we're looking at that. Biggest thing I will tell you is I reserve the right to charge your region's financial plan if you fail to do this. And that has caused a few phone calls for me from the region managers. But at the same time, I have to ensure that we are getting the biggest bang for the buck from the feds as we possibly can. So, by the way, if you have an interstate maintenance job and you go over budget by $200K and you haven't submitted the forms, the $200K is coming from the region, it's not coming from IM. Not until we get everything squared away. And that's usually where the region managers get caught up and go, uh-oh, what's going on? Why did I get charged? This is our way of keeping us moving forward in the right fashion. Okay, end dates. So the end of 2014, Federal Highway provided us with the new rule that we had to provide end dates by phase. You get to establish the end date. We have some general business rules. PE, right-of-way utilities, general business rule is 6 months from PS&E. After PS&E is when we will set that end date. Construction is 2 years from second note or plant establishment, whichever one is greater, because we know that plant establishment usually goes well past second note. So we will set those, and then we have to adhere to that. End dates are important, and here's why. If you have an end date of June 30th, all charges and everything else to be reimbursed by the feds has to occur before June 30th of the year that you provided. If it goes after, it is a non-participating cost and comes out of the state cash. So I'll back up to my comment a little bit ago about the state cash side. We're limited on the number of state cash. So I've had a handful of projects that have done this, and we've had to deal with it on the state cash side, which is then taking away the flexibility to be able to state fund specific activities that we have along the way. So we have to make sure we're watching that. So everything has to be paid within 45 days. So the work can occur by June 30th. The bills need to be paid within 45 days of that end date so that we can process and get reimbursed on the right time period. Can you extend them? Yes, you can. A couple reasons of things that we hear all the time, and this has been a huge improvement that everybody has made over the last couple of years. We don't have bodies to work on the project is one of the things we've heard. We all have a lot going on, and we all have a lot of resource issues going on. That's not an acceptable reason with FHWA. We have to shut that project down and then restart it when we have the resources available. So if we're running into a circumstance where your tech center says, we can't do it, talk to your STIP coordinator, we will shut the thing down, and then we will restart it. The cool part about that is when we restart, we can reset the end date. So we can do that process as long as we're doing everything on the front end properly. Oops, we didn't have enough money. Back to the same theme that we've been having, fully funded. Going back and saying we didn't have enough money. It's one thing to sit there and go, the cost expectations on the ADA ramps went up because of the following reasons. Different conversation. That is cost increases due to the work that we were already doing. But to go back and say, oops, we just didn't load the STIP to begin with the right number, that's a no-no. And then the oops, or the dope, admin, we forgot to process paperwork. Isn't gonna work. So trying to extend an end date because I forgot about it for 6 months isn't gonna work. Tips, tricks, and resources. Utilize your STIP coordinator. Engage them early and not late. Utilize your STIP coordinator. Communication. Utilize your STIP coordinator. They are critical to be able to get you guys through this. And then data entry into various systems in timely fashion. So this goes to all the work, is not only the STIP system, but also to the work that David and Tamara are doing. Having all of their requirements in helps us manage the process and be able to stay ahead of things quicker and easier as far as trying to get us to one system of truth and be able to report out on that. So the other part, as you think about projects with some tips, over the years is if you have, in today's environment especially, if you've got a project that has anywhere near an ADA ramp, add right-of-way. Put it in there. Put something in there so you don't have to add right-of-way phase later on. I get the fact, it's easier for us to take something out of the STIP than it is to add it in. So if you've got an estimate, you just, I've got 10 ramps, they cost us $20,000, throw the $200K in there and call it good. Because we can always move the money to construction if it's really not going to cost you $200K. But having it in there is easier for us to take it out because we can obligate at a lower number than we can by trying to add it because we can't obligate till the money's there. So we are trying to work through that with the scoping process, but that's another one. The resources, you got the STIP FP, you have your project management reports, your project system data entry, and again, that table right there of your STIP coordinators. Questions? Well, I'm trying to get them out to lunch because I know that's what they're thinking about.
Can you go into some detail about your PS&E estimate provided by the region, updated STIP, final engineer's estimate, and then the bid?
Okay, so PS&E estimate from the region is what trumps, so that's going to be the number that's going to be used. If that number is higher than what the STIP has, you're going to have to amend the STIP. You give it to OPL, and OPL says, we're thinking it's going to be higher. Okay, that's an awareness thing. It's something for the region to be thinking about to figure out what you're going to do from a funding gap perspective. But the region's estimate is what sticks first. Fast forward to award. When award comes in, we will cross bridges accordingly depending on what's going on. I have Federal Highway's approval on us not to hold up an award because we're doing a STIP amendment. So in the event that the economy is going like it is right now, where you guys are in a crapshoot about whether or not it's going to go up or down or whatever the case may be, if you do come in higher, we may have to deal with some things on that, but FHWA will allow us to award the contract. But the favor in return to allow that was making sure that we get the STIP amendment done in a timely fashion once we're knowing that we're going to push that project forward no matter what. Because when you guys get high awards, you guys have the ability to cancel the bid if you really want to. But if you're not going to, because the right business decision is to move it forward, we can run those concurrently. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm.
Jeff, can you go over the stop and start again? I missed it.
The start?
The stop and start.
Sure. So if you have a project because of resources, political issues, anything that's going to take your project to a stop, and you're not sure whether or not you're going to come back and do it, or you don't have the resources to do it because you have things that you have to discuss, figure out, resource, whatever, we need to stop that project from being obligated, basically. We're going to tell FHWA we're not working on it, so it does not stay, quote unquote, obligated in the system. And then when we restart it, which it can be 2 weeks later, 6 months later, a year later, because we've done that now, we can reestablish that end date upon the restart. So if you've got a project that you started on January 1st and you think you're going to have it done by December 31st of the same year, say in June you guys have to stop because of reason X, we would shut down the EA, we would get everything in the system shut down. And then come January, you finally have the resolution that you know. We'll restart it in January, restart that EA up, and when we tell FHWA we're ready, we'll now reestablish the end date for them at that time. So the idea behind that is another piece of the puzzle, which I didn't touch on. It's called inactives. So an inactive project is a project that hasn't billed to FHWA within 9 months. So if we haven't done anything on the project side for 9 months, it becomes a flag for FHWA to go, why are you guys doing this? And their methodology is you guys, and it's all states, are sitting on money that could be deobligated and used on other projects and start new projects, et cetera. So, I mean, there's logic behind that. However, there's the give and the take. So, is that? Mm-hmm.
Jeff, I got a question.
So in an earlier slide, you said that we're very limited in state funds. House Bill 2017, $5.2, $5.3 billion of state funding, so it's very counterintuitive. Can you explain why?
Yes. So we get a 2-cent increase, and then we get another 2-cent increase, and we get, I think, 2 more 2-cent increases along the 4 of them total, right? So we got 8 cents coming to us over a period of time, right? That 10-year time period. The issue that we have as far as state gas tax goes is that that money's all encumbered or spoken for. So it first comes off, basically you have safe routes to school. First of all, foremost, let me back up before that. You have the 50% cut that the cities and the counties get right off the top, just like every other state gas we have already. Then you start going into our programs, which was safety and safe routes to school, which it'll be about $30 million right off the top every year that those programs are going to be getting. And then we get into the earmarked funds. We have the bonding program that's coming out of it. And then on top of that, we have what we call the splits. So that money is not even going towards our operations, our general operations. Because once the money is free and clear of all the lines that we have to pay for up front, 70% of that leftover money has to go to bridge and seismic work. 24% then goes to pavement and culverts, and 6% to maintenance. So at the end of the day, we have to account for every single penny that comes in to be able to go through that. And so when everyone's like, yeah, we just got us all this new state cash. No, we didn't, because that's the reason we have more bridge projects and more PRES projects coming out of the gate now, is because those programs are influxed by that, by law, and does not allow us to fluctuate that money or move it around. So it has, as awesome as the House bill is, it, from a financial perspective, is also a little bit of a negative to us because of the fact it cuts our flexibility. It's awesome that we get to go do some new things, but it hurts our flexibility on the back end because they didn't give us any.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Mike.
That whole concept about stopping a project, just, I mean, culturally, that's not something we do, right? I mean, Ken yells at us for that. No, I'm kidding.
He's shaking his head behind you.
I'm just wondering, so let's say we did stop a project and we get a reset, right? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of a cool process, especially if you had some political issues that you had to work through. You'd have to do some kind of STIP amendment after that, right? On a parallel thing, or how does that work?
It depends. Part of it depends. So if you're restarting PE, no, you will not have to do a STIP amendment because the project had already been authorized to begin with. So restarting PE is not an amendment. Where the amendment will kick in is depending on your delay, what is that doing to your right-of-way phase, your construction phase, as far as slipping those timelines. So the financial side of getting your EA open more than likely is not going to trigger a STIP amendment. But the delay in the process itself will trigger a STIP amendment because there's going to be a downstream impact to your overall timeline. So you'll have, it's a yes and a no depending on what part of that process you want to talk about.
So I have one, Jeff, for you. Can a STIP project be funded 100% private?
Yes.
And what are the parameters, expectations, conditions around that?
So it can be private, it can be 100% locally funded. We deem it based on whether or not that regional area deems it as a regionally significant project. As soon as that definition is tagged to the project, it goes into the STIP. Now, that doesn't mean what's regionally significant for Gary and Bend is going to be the same thing that Ryan has to deal with up in Portland. Each geographic area gets to define that. So there's some, and that's where the MPOs are kind of in play on that piece of the puzzle. A thought process is always going to be is if you were doing PE only with private funds, local funds only, in hopes that you're going to get a federal grant, 64, correct? What we got for 97? Probably a good idea to go ahead and put it in the STIP because you're prepping for that. You're showing your good faith effort moving forward that that's what you want to do. Or if you don't know how you're going to fund construction, maybe the local says, hey, I'll pay for PE and I need local bridge to come in and pay for construction downstream, and I'm willing to give that up if I know I can get the construction later, because we broker those type of deals, get it in, because it's going to be federal, which means it's going to come into the STIP anyway. Now, process-wise goes, there's a lot of things that in the past, we've cleaned up the process to make sure that we're running everything basically the same way as far as getting EAs open and the whole nine, because we want the consistency for you guys. That seems, folks will go, well, it's easier for me just to send an email like I did 10 years ago, which is exactly what we did on state-funded projects. And I stopped that about 4 years ago, because what had ended up happening was folks were starting projects early on a federal aid project. The processes were so different, and folks were getting confused, not remembering which is which, because you guys have a lot of stuff on your plate. So I cut that out and said, no, we're doing the same thing regardless, so that way we're in the same habits all the way through. And the same thing goes through. We'll fix the process once we start it and speed it up where we can. But the idea for project delivery is to keep things as consistent as we possibly can, because if you do that, then we lower our risk and issues of having problems happen later. Because we've run into that so many times over the years that's been like, okay, process changed because of X, Y, and Z. So.
We have time for one more question. Scott's going to.
I'll ask this one on behalf of all the others that won't. I get a project, I open up the STIP, and I see it's got $100,000. I'm just going to pick a number. And I wonder, where did that number come from? Because when I look at the scoping estimate, it's different. Is there a place that I can go to get the breakdown on that 100,000?
Probably the area manager.
Yeah, you can. It'll be within the region itself. You guys will have to figure out who's the depository of your information, because each region kind of does things with their scoping docs a little bit different, and where that comes from. So how it ends up in the STIP that way, I could take the next 20 minutes and describe what happened in my 6 years at Region 1. Some good, some bad. So I would start with your region. That does not end up coming out of my shop as far as that goes. We get whatever product you provide to us, whether that product's good or not. So that'd be a regional conversation. Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
So just to add to that, as we move forward to project-wise, as our data for scoping documents, and I think that'll help in terms of tracking down the history, assumptions. We're about to launch a scoping task force, which will identify a better standard of practice, because we know these projects sit a long, long time. You get it, and it's like, where did the information come from? In the past, it'd be on somebody's shared drive, be in some folder. The vision is to get all in the project-wise, to have all that information.
Great. Let's give Jeff a good round of applause.